Hello and welcome to Words of the Wild, a podcast brought to you by the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Thank you very much for joining us. This is our second episode. My name is Ed and I'm really excited to be here. I'm part of the communications team here at the Trust and I'm going to be hosting this series along with my fantastic colleague who's with me just now.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. Thank you so much for tuning in. The reason we're bringing this podcast to you is not only because we have so many stories to tell, but also because it's the Trust's 60th anniversary this year. There's a never-ending line of stories to tell, and we've got some more to share with you today.
In this episode, we are going to be featuring a few different projects and bits and pieces from the Trust's work. We're looking at waterways and rivers and woodlands as well, and there's a bit of a theme, hopefully, to some of our features in this episode. But we've got some great stuff coming up, so hopefully you enjoy.
So we are now going to dive right into river woodland habitats and hear about the fantastic Riverwoods initiative from Sarah, Ben and Rosie. So I hope you enjoy this feature.
Hello, my name's Sarah Robinson and I'm the Director of Conservation for the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Riverwoods is a relatively new initiative, but quite an ambitious one, building on our experience as an organisation in large partnership projects and seeking to deliver for the environment with people. The ambition of Riverwoods requires us to work in partnership. There's no way we could do this, and there's no way we would seek to see ourselves as responsible for Riverwoods throughout Scotland. The driver behind it's always been this delivery of a national ecological network. So trying to connect, that's one of the big sort of drivers of biodiversity loss, is this fragmentation of the landscape. So how do we ensure there aren't little islands that are more vulnerable to all the different change that we're going to experience going forward? How do we connect them up and strengthen them and help them join? And the opportunity that the thousands of kilometres of rivers, streams, burns provide Scotland. You know, there's 10,000 kilometres of coastline. There's 125,000 kilometres of rivers and burns and sort of freshwater. So if you can improve that riparian habitat, you can go a long way to creating a network that wildlife can move through. And, you know, thinking at that scale, there's no way you can do that in anything but partnership. So one of the key partners for us in Riverwoods is definitely Fisheries Management Scotland, who are the umbrella organisation of all of the river trusts and fisheries trusts throughout Scotland. So they've been a key partner, as are various landowners, because they're the people who ultimately make the decision about improving that riparian zone, as well as statutory agencies who maybe provide grants and support to incentivise or enable landowners to deliver. So it's a broad church-wide partnership. We're also hoping to bring new people into that partnership that can support riparian restoration. The Trust has launched the initiative and always been very clear that it is very much a collection. You know, it takes all of us to realise the vision that Riverwoods has. So we're definitely in that coordinating role, trying to bring groups of people who might think about the science together, might think about novel finance together. But we do, as an organisation, have a number of reserves that sit within that riparian area or sit on a burn. You know, and we've done a lot of work ourselves in improving those riparian spaces, and we are looking where we can. You know, this is very early days in some cases, but we're looking at how do we join our reserve up through the improvement of the riparian zone beyond the boundaries of the reserve to the next piece of suitable or good habitat. It's a really difficult space to plant trees in. Rivers and streams are very dynamic. They don't always stay in the same place. They shouldn't necessarily always stay in the same place. And as we see an increase in sort of things like storm events, the volume of water that's passing through some of these streams and rivers is different. So the actual planting or natural regeneration that you're seeking to achieve ecologically is quite hard to sort of establish and plan that. And then layered on top of that is the challenge around land ownership. and decisions about that land, the area that you may seek to realise some riparian planting in could have multiple landowners. Gaining agreement from all of them is quite challenging. But what I would say is, if you were looking to improve or increase woodland cover alongside or sort of neighbouring a stream or burn is possibly the path of least resistance through a landscape, because it's an area that shouldn't be farmed. It's an area that you want to ensure is supporting a healthy river, and so naturally that requires a healthy riparian area alongside the river. So it's, in terms of realising gains for the landscape, it's not a bad one to push for, because I think if you asked a farmer to put a swathe of trees through the middle of his field, he'd of course say, no, I need to use that for my crops. But if you asked him to improve the riparian zone, I mean, all of the Scottish Environment Protection Agency requirements upon that farmer would probably point towards him doing it anyway. But yeah, it's not easy. It's the land ownership. It's not easy because of that dynamic environment you're trying to operate in. But I think it's a huge opportunity that a lot of people should embrace.
I'm Ben Townsend. My current role is with the Tweed Forum as a senior project officer, helping to manage their woodland portfolio in the Tweed catchment, so both north and south of the border, which is spanning riparian woodlands, wider sort of river woodlands, and some larger native catchment woodlands. Previously, I was working with the Wildlife Trust on the lottery-funded Riverwoods project, which was in its development phase at the time. So I'm hoping that will all go forward. And through the Tweed Forum, I'll still be involved in the delivery phase of that project. Riparian habitats provide multiple benefits. When you're looking at it from an ecological point of view, they're kind of the lifeblood, the artery system of the landscape. You'd struggle to stand anywhere in Scotland and be far from a freshwater system. So those riparian habitats are sort of key habitat corridors, and they're also a key sort of interface between land and water and nutrient cycling and species migration. So they're very rich in biodiversity comparatively to their size. So there's that benefit, and as we know, a lot of our riparian habitats are quite degraded. So there's always a need to improve them, and in doing so, we can connect a lot of potentially isolated native habitats that aren't necessarily on rivers, but they're close to rivers. So there's the sort of biodiversity benefits. There's also, for the sort of rural industries, they help mitigate some of the impacts of rural industries, but also protect them. So some farms struggle with bank erosion, reducing their field sizes and eating into their field margins. So riparian trees are very effective at stabilizing riverbanks and reducing the extreme nature to which a river might migrate across the floodplain. But also a well-designed, large enough riparian strip can help intercept runoff from fields, whether it's excess nutrients from fertilizers or pesticides, or even soil runoff. We lose a lot of soil to overland flow every year, and riparian woodlands can be helpful to intercept all of these different sort of chemicals or soils. I suppose seeing the full process from the initial building a relationship with the landowner through the design and funding through implementation is really satisfying. It can come with its hurdles. Some projects can take 3, 4, 5, 6 years to go through that full process due to constraints, due to sort of changing objectives of landowners, and due to sort of funding cycles. So it can be very satisfying when things work out the way you'd like them to, and they happen within a sort of 1 to 2 year time frame. But occasionally you have to hold your patience and allow a project to spin its wheels when it needs to. But there's also sort of balancing it with the scientific relationships we hold. Obviously, we have the Edelston catchment in the Tweed, which is a demonstrator for natural flood management. So we're always trying to see how we can incorporate the scientific community into the work we do. And that's quite a satisfying relationship to balance as well, to know that the work we're doing could have an impact on wider sort of modeling and prioritizing of woodlands. Riverwoods, it's evolved out of an idea over the last 5 or 6 years. And that idea has brought together a lot of organizations across Scotland, large and small, who all have a vested interest in freshwater habitats, freshwater quality, and terrestrial habitats. The Tweed Forum has been delivering riparian woodlands for well over 2 decades now. So they have a good track record in delivering. So I think when the Riverwoods concept came along, they were very keen to be involved in it. And some of the partners that were also keen to get on board were ones we were already working with. We've got Dundee University very involved in the Edelston. We've got SEPA working across the country, and we're often working quite closely with them and how we can help landowners deal with issues that might be seen as negatively impactful by SEPA. We work across the spectrum. We also work with the local fishery trust on the Tweed. So it evolved organically, and with this new lottery-funded project, we're hoping that this kind of organic network is going to start to have more of a structure and more of a clear method by which it's governed and by which we can all kind of contribute to the big picture. Yeah, it's kind of hard to keep track of sometimes, but I think that's where Rosie's really useful, that she's still at the core of it.
I am Rosie McGuigan. I am the Riverwoods Partnership Support Officer. My current role has, I'd say, 2 main aspects. So it's working with the Riverwoods Initiative partners. We have 5 different advisory groups. So I work with them, arrange the meetings, do comms between those groups, and also have been working on creating kind of processes and structures to help build the partnership. And then the kind of other part of my work is supporting the Blueprint project. So doing kind of administrative support for that, planning events and workshops, meetings, minutes, financial processes, the stuff that, keeps a project ticking over. The Riverwoods Blueprint project, that is focused on river woodlands, but the Riverwoods initiative is all things to do with riparian habitats, river woodlands, the river systems themselves. And it's a collective space for all the different kind of parties who have a stake in river woodlands and healthy river systems in Scotland. And it takes in all of the different projects, but it's not led by one organisation. It's trying to make sure that action is cohesive and that, we're making best use of resources and that there's communication between all of these various groups, right down from, those who are delivering projects on the ground. So, your community level groups all the way up to your statutory agencies and your government agencies and things like that, is trying to bring everyone kind of in one kind of forum so that we can tackle things together rather than separately. We have just completed the development phase of the Blueprint project. So we have been funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund this year. And these projects are split into 2 phases. So we have the development phase, which is a 1-year development phase, which is where we've been putting together our plans of what the project's going to look like, what activities we're going to run, doing the research behind it, workshops, consultations with partners. And as I said, there's so many areas that we're touching on. It's been quite a hefty piece of work to figure out how we're going to work in this space and, complement all the action that's already going on. So that's been the first part of this first year, has been figuring that all out and devising our plan. Right now, we're in an interim kind of period whilst we submitted an application for the delivery phase funding to the lottery. If we're successful, we'll find out in September, and then we'll start the project again, our delivery phase, in October of this year, and that will run for just under 4 years, and we'll finish in the summer of 2028. So we're in a little bit of a holding period now. It's a really, really exciting thing to be a part of, and everyone will kind of have some interest in it, I think, given the breadth of it and what we're trying to achieve.
So thank you to Sarah, Ben and Rosie for telling us a little bit more about Riverwoods. I mean, one of my favourite habitats to sort of be out in and exploring in is riparian woodland. And I think it's such a tranquil habitat to be in. And so hearing, from Sarah, Ben and Rosie giving us that kind of little bit more insight into how important they are as well was really interesting for me. And yeah, I for one can't wait to see how the project progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things that really struck me talking to our speakers there, was just how much work Riverwoods is doing. There's tons of stuff within that project, and there's tons more stuff in the works as well. So watch this space. I think, yeah, Riverwoods will be doing some exciting stuff in the future. But like you say, Rachel, rivers are an important habitat, and they're home to a hugely diverse range of species. And one of the most important species on Scottish waterways are beavers. And back in 2009, the Trust was the lead partner in the groundbreaking Scottish Beaver Trial, along with the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. We're going to be hearing from Sarah Robinson again, as well as the fantastic Roisin Campbell-Palmer from the Beaver Trust. Enjoy.
Hi, my name's Roisin Campbell-Palmer. I'm Head of Restoration at the Beaver Trust, and a big part of my role is really to promote coexistence with beavers in Scottish landscapes today. I do a lot of translocations of animals. I provide as much advice as possible for different stakeholders to try and really engage people with this species and see how we can promote its wider restoration in Britain. So I was involved in the Scottish Beaver Trial as the Field Operations Manager, which was great because I was there based at the trial, managing our staff, but also kind of leading up on all the monitoring, looking after the beavers and engaging with the public on site. The beaver trial was really groundbreaking at the time because, beavers had just really started to appear as a kind of species that people were really excited and talking about. There was a lot of background research and talk about beavers coming back to Scotland for many years before that. But the beaver trial really opened the doors to getting beavers on the ground out in Scotland. Looking back now, it was actually quite a big political feat. There was lots of hoops to jump through, lots of bridges to cross. So when the actual animals arrived from Norway, we were just super excited that it was really happening. Given all the projects in England and Scotland today, it seems it's more common to have beavers around. But at the time, this really was the first official reintroduction of a mammal without fences to Britain. So we were all just super excited and proud to be part of this project. Obviously I'm biased, but beavers bring so many benefits to our ecosystems, and as a native mammal they really are part of the picture, and you can see how they just naturally slot back in. So the term ecosystem engineers is bandied about a lot because basically that's what they are. When you put beavers into the mix, they can not only create wetlands out of nothing, but they also kind of maintain and increase the complexity of our existing habitats. So beavers, through all their different activities, can really generate a whole system of kind of microhabitats and activities. So we can see where beavers come back, biodiversity benefits increase, but they're always kind of dynamic and they're always changing. And this in itself is a generator of biodiversity change. So beavers kind of mix up the system. I always say they're not clean, neat species, they're messy species, but messy is good for our nature and our habitats. Another really positive thing about beavers is they also provide a whole range of services. So if you think about holding back sediment runoff from the land, improving our water quality, their dams, for example, trap a lot of not only sediment but pollutants behind the dam. But beavers will also regenerate woodlands, which seems a bit counterintuitive because people know them for cutting down trees. But our native species have evolved with beavers. So when beavers come along and feed on trees, they kind of regenerate, they coppice, they leave a lot of both dead and standing wood. And this is all really, really important for our ecosystems. And it's really almost like the missing lost piece of the puzzle when we look at some of our landscapes today in Britain. I think some of the biggest challenges of the time, really, it was just how novel it was. Like I say, it hadn't really been done to that scale before. And beavers, they're not a subtle species. So when we talked about bringing back this fairly large rodent that can have dramatic changes on its immediate habitat and environment, there was challenges and people were, I guess, suspicious, they were concerned. We had so many rumours going about at the time. Are they going to cut down all the trees? Are they going to eat all the salmon? People's perception of beavers were ranged greatly from they're brilliant, absolutely perfect animals to, oh no, this is the worst thing you could actually ever do. So I think a big part of the challenge was just showing people what they did and how they could, in theory, slot back into Scotland. And a big part of people being able to come and see beavers in a naturalised habitat was just to kind of bust some of these myths of what this species actually does. So a lot of our job was, yes, monitoring, scientific recording, monitoring the animals themselves, but a huge part of it was engaging with people and just showing, look, this is a species that we could coexist with if people are kind of willing to look at how we manage the countryside, especially our rivers, especially our waterways, and just see, is this an animal that we could live with again? I think the trial really has long-lasting effects and impacts, not only just on our ecosystems, but also how we are looking at reintroductions to Britain in general. At the time, it was a lot of work. There's often a lot of critique that it was expensive, and it was expensive because we were breaking new ground. We had so many rules and regulations to follow, but we kind of took that as, look, we do this now to hopefully benefit beavers and future reintroductions to come. So it was a slog, I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of monitoring. Some people say over-monitoring, but that was the licence conditions. So the team at the time were just really passionate and dedicated to proving not only are beavers easy to have back in our landscape, that they should be there, but also any challenges that they bring, we can learn from this, we can learn from Europe, and we can, develop a system that really sees the promotion of coexistence of this species back in our landscape.
Hi there, my name's Sarah Robinson. I've actually been involved with the Scottish Beaver Trial prior to working with the Scottish Wildlife Trust. I was with one of the partner organisations, the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, when it all started in 2009. The Scottish Beaver Trial was one of the largest field trials of its kind in the UK, and at the time it was the first introduction of a mammal to the UK, and it was largely set up to help the Scottish Government make an informed decision about the return of the species to the wider countryside. So the Scottish Beaver Trial started in 2009 and ran until 2014. And then that was followed by another project called Scottish Beavers, which reinforced the population in Knapdale. And the whole project really was sort of laying this very strong foundation for future rewilding initiatives, I guess, in Scotland, and considerations around improving the biodiversity of Scotland and looking at how we can approach something like a reintroduction of what some consider is quite a controversial species because it has such a sort of wide impact on the landscape, and we've obviously been living without it for 400 years. We had to go through a huge process to acquire a license to undertake the trial, and at the same time as that trial was occurring, there were releases or escapes in Tayside, which was not part of a sort of sanctioned trial, but because of the numbers on Tayside, it became, I guess, an opportunity, or the best way to approach it was to explore beavers in that landscape as well. But it's safe to say that beavers in Knapdale have become an accepted part of the landscape, and beavers on Tayside we're still continuing to manage conflict. But there is a mitigation framework which came into effect prior to the species getting this sort of European protected species status, but is very much a key part of managing beavers in the landscape. The Trust have always supported that framework, which allows us to manage with a hierarchy approach and tries to sort of mitigate these issues in the landscape where beavers can cause challenges because they create landscape change. I mean, that's the huge ecological benefit of bringing them back. The lasting impact is definitely, I guess, splits into two. So it's better understanding the ecological role of beavers in the Scottish landscape, but very importantly alongside that is the social impact or the social framework and structure that we need to put in place to live with beavers. So the experience on Tayside has been challenging, and beavers appearing in that landscape, which is very different to Knapdale, has been challenged though because we haven't done any of that pre-work, we haven't done any stakeholder engagement, there hasn't been the huge effort that was put into the trial in looking at how we mitigate and manage alongside exploring beavers back in the landscape. So, I think that's one of the real lasting benefits that the trials brought is trying to show people, how do you approach this in the best way possible for success? And success is being able to have beavers integrated into the Scottish landscape again and realise those ecological benefits alongside continuing to sort of do all the things we normally do, or we have been doing, or we want to continue doing. It was a real privilege to be there on a boat in the middle of a loch and watch a beaver appear, or just hear a beaver munch on the various sort of water plants it was doing, or even just, I still am thrilled by seeing beaver signs, these wonderful structures they create, be it the dams or even just, some of the sort of felling of trees. It's thrilling to see that. It's thrilling to think, I'm in a landscape where these animals exist. And I do feel very fortunate that I got to be part of that, and to, many frustrated nights sat trying to understand what they were doing or record what they were doing. But it was, it's just really special to sort of have that experience and be part of it.
So yeah, it was great to hear from Roisin and Sarah, so thank you both. I think we can all agree how amazing and fascinating beavers are. I really like Roisin calling them messy species, which I think they definitely are. I mean, looking back, it's absolutely amazing what the trial achieved, from the political and educational side of things, and to the fact it was also so novel, being that first mammal reintroduction in Britain. I think it's an incredibly powerful tool for reintroductions going forward, and it was so great to hear Roisin and Sarah's personal insights from working on the project.
And just to say, I know that Roisin mentioned that myth about beavers eating salmon, but just to 100% confirm, beavers are entirely vegetarian and don't in fact eat fish. But a huge thanks to Roisin there from Beaver Trust for doing some fantastic work. And I should also mention that they have their own podcast, so if you are interested in finding out more about beavers, do go and check out their website. It's called The Lodgecast, which is a very thematic name. Do go and check them out. They're doing some great stuff as well. So as part of the Scottish Wildlife Trust's 60th anniversary celebrations, we are also running our Words of the Wild storytelling competition. We're inviting you to tell your stories of Scotland's wildlife and wild places. Whether you've witnessed a breathtaking wildlife spectacle or you've had a wildlife encounter that stopped you in your tracks, we'd love to know which words you'd use to describe these wild experiences.
That's right. So whether you've never written anything like this before or you're an avid writer, you can send up to 1,000 words of nature writing, and it can be in any form you like. So you could send us a poem, a letter, an article, or a short story, or even a song lyric if that's your jam. As long as it's connected to native Scottish wildlife, you can submit it to the competition. So entries can be fiction or non-fiction, so imagined or real, but we are looking for stories of real Scottish wildlife. So unfortunately, no stories about wild haggis or fairies, please. So we have a junior category for under 18s, and we've got an adult category for everyone over 18. And the winners will receive a great bundle of prizes. So it includes a pair of fantastic binoculars from Viking Optical, an environmental book subscription from the Main Street Trading Company. We have vouchers from NHBS, which is a super company that have a huge selection of wildlife watching and surveying equipment. And for the junior category, there's a great trail cam starter bundle, and it has everything in there that you need to get started with your wildlife watch exploring. So deadlines for entries are the 31st of August 2024, so this year. So please head over to our website. You'll find all of the details and how to submit your entry. And good luck.
A little while ago, I headed up north for a very special event at our Benmore Kayak Reserve. Now, the event was held in the Kayak Community Hall, almost as far as I could go down a single track road. It was a very wet and blustery day on the northwest coast, which made for incredibly dramatic scenery and a very cosy feeling event. Hosted by our wonderful chair, Kenny Taylor, and we chatted to some of the local people. And the thing that really struck me was just how connected everyone was to the local landscape and the surrounding landscape. It was a fantastic event, and I had a brilliant time listening to all their stories and experiences of the area. A lot of people have been up in that part of the world for a very long time and have some brilliant stories to share. We hear from Anne Campbell, the Trust's crofting officer, as well as her brother Ian, and also Anne Barnes, who worked as the Trust's ranger about 30 years ago and has been a long-standing member of the community in the Coigach area.
During the course of this year, the Trust wants to be doing various things to celebrate our work in different ways. This is part of it. We kicked off things with our first kind of big public-facing event was at Holyrood, sponsored by an MSP. And I think to me it encapsulated part of what the Trust's about, that although obviously wildlife in its broadest sense is at the core of the Trust's work, so too are people in different communities across Scotland. And obviously in recent years through Coigach and Uasant Living Landscape, then I hope that the Trust's relationship with local communities in the wider area here has got stronger. But I'm thinking it'd be good just to have a chat, with people around the table about your experience of living here, knowing here, a couple of cases having grown up here but gone away and come back again, those sort of things. And I wonder, Anne Campbell, down the way there, if I could maybe kick off with yourself. You spent your girlhood basically in this area and then were away. What drew you back?
Well, I suppose I've always maintained strong connections here. Most of my family are here, lots of friends here, and I visited often. I never lost contact with the place, and I didn't think I would ever come back here. I mean, I lived city centre since I've been a teenager, basically, and I just didn't think I could be here, and I didn't think I'd be able to earn a living either. I didn't know what I could do. So things kind of happen, and I said it was almost by accident that I ended up here. And then I got some work, and then when I joined the Call project, I think I became much more settled then. It was a really sort of worthwhile and fulfilling job to have, and to work with crofters again. Having been brought up on a croft, it was really interesting.
Because actually, with people listening to this, I mean, you mentioned Coigach Uasant Living Landscape, and quite a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know what that is. Is there a way that you could describe what the concept of that was?
Well, the Coigach Uasant Living Landscape scheme was, I think there were 14 partners in it, something like 33 different projects, maybe more actually in the end, and it covered natural, built and cultural heritage projects. So there was everything from, restoring the broch at Clashnessie to, no, not to Clashnessie, what is it? It's Tuchtall. And, working with crofters, producing a book about fishing, producing a book about, there was a whole project on music and tales of Coigach and Uasant that's resulted in 2 CDs now, and there was a vast array of projects on a landscape scale covering, I can't remember how many hectares. I think it was recognised as one of the biggest projects in Europe, physically, the area that it covered. But very few people in that area. But the culture is there, and that was very much celebrated, very much part of that project.
Yeah, Coigach Uasant was really impressive in terms of the scale of it. So with that, you'd got a crofting involvement there with the work for Call, for short, and then that's continued since with the Wildlife Trust. So you're now part of the Scottish Wildlife Trust staff with that. So what does that involve here?
It's been more concentrated on this estate, Benmore Coigach. So it was quite difficult to cover the whole of Coigach and Uasant, and particularly during COVID as well. That put the kibosh on quite a lot of things.
So, I mean, it's probably hard sometimes to sort of think back to, exactly how things were when you were looking at a field back in the day. But when, people had cows for the milk, and when there was more cultivation, was there anything about like the bird life around here that struck you as different to now?
There's more bird life. There's farmland birds, and you get yellowhammers and stuff, birds like that. I'm not very good on birds, but Yeah, there's a lot more bird life, more variety. Because I remember my last year in school up here, I got a prize of an observer book of birds. And I remember going down this, must have been when the school shut end of June, and I identified 20 varieties of birds.
You know yourself about this place before there was any Scottish Wildlife Trust involvement and how that came about, really.
Yes, the whole place was sold in, I think, about 1960. And Philip Henman had it for a number of years, and then he put it up for sale. And Christopher Cadbury bought it then because they had historical connections with the place. They used to come here and stay in the tail and go fishing and all that stuff. So I think Christopher Cadbury came here as a young man, or maybe as a teenager. So he obviously had fond memories of the place, because when it came up for sale, he bought it. And I think he gifted it to the RSNC then, I think.
It's the Royal Society for Nature Conservation.
That's right. And they had it for a number of years, and it was eventually, then it was handed over to the Wildlife Trust.
Aye, well, Sir Christopher Cadbury was a great supporter of, if you like, the Wildlife Trust network, of which the Scottish Wildlife Trust is still part. So, and there was further involvement that way across at Rahoy and, towards Mull, at Ardtornish, because it wasn't Christopher Cadbury there, but again, there was that RSNC link. So, yeah, I don't know whether it was at that time, actually, when it went over to Scottish Wildlife Trust with Anne Barnes sitting at my right. That was probably around the time that you got involved. You started in, the later 1980s?
80s, yeah, 87, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I was summer warden for 2 summers.
Mm-hmm. So where had you come from to be here?
From the Isle of Rum, where I'd also done 2 summers with SNH. I think the reason I got this job was because I'd survived the mountains of Rum without dying. So that was the main qualification, I think, for being here.
Daft question, really, but what is it about living in Achilty and the surrounds that floats your boat so much?
It's just special, really. As a nature person, the small council estate I live in, we get golden eagles flying over and skeins of geese flying over, and we can hear great northern divers, and I don't think there's many council estates where you can hear those sort of things. And the scenery, the scenery is amazing.
But we hope you enjoyed that feature from our very, very special storytelling event up at Benmore Koyak. It is an absolutely stunning part of the world. It was a really brilliant event, and a huge thank you to Kenny for hosting, as well as everyone that turned up. A huge thank you to them for sharing their stories. A phenomenal insight into kind of life in quite a rugged part of the world, really. A beautiful place that hopefully I'll get to go back to at some point, because there's lots of great stuff up that way.
I just love hearing people's passion for their home and the nature on their doorstep. And knowledge and power really is in the community when it comes to protecting nature. So I think that was incredibly interesting to listen to. Hearing people going away and then coming back home again, and that re-falling in love and connecting with the space all over again was really interesting as well.
Yeah, it's certainly an easy place to fall in love with, for sure. It's, like I said, absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much for joining us for this episode. If you've got some feedback or you want to get in touch, please do let us know. You can reach us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual platforms. If you want to drop us an email, you can reach us via email at communications@scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk. We'd love to hear what you think. If you've got some feedback or you want to let us know about things that you've enjoyed or would like to hear more about, please do get in touch. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please do join us next week for more Words of the Wild.